From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We're joined, as always, with our super producer, Alexis, codename Doc Holliday Jackson. Most importantly, you are here, and that makes this Stuff They Don't Want You to Know. This is our listener mail segment, so every week we find at least 3 pieces of correspondence from the most important part of this show, your fellow listeners. We've got some doozies here today, and as we've said in the past, we get this massive amount of correspondence via email, via social accounts, via our good old telephone number, 1-833-STDWYTK. And Matt, I believe that our first piece of listener mail today is, in fact, a message, right?
It is. It's a message from Lana, and let's just play it.
Hi guys, I'm Lana, and I was listening to one of your latest listener mails, and you were talking about the cruise industry, and I was thinking a really interesting thing to look into for your listeners and to bring awareness to is the disappearance of Rebecca Coriam. She disappeared in 2011 from a cruise ship, which have since been realized to sort of be possible hubs of human trafficking, and I think that aspect of cruise ships and stuff could make for a really interesting full episode. Thanks. Love the show. Bye.
And there we go. We have been talking about cruises quite a bit in the recent past. I think our interest was first peaked when we were just learning about the trap, the viral infectious trap that a cruise ship can become when out at sea and just a single infected person gets on board. And, you know, it then became, I guess, our interest in what the industry overall has been doing for many years about law when you're on international waters, and just some of the industry's regular habits about how they keep costs down. Really interesting stuff, but we have not talked specifically about any disappearances. I don't think, Ben, unless I'm wrong.
We've talked in the past we've explored some cases of people who went missing in international waters, while not necessarily on a cruise ship. But just like that episode of Always Sunny in Philadelphia, you know, the rules are different on the high seas. And I really love that you pointed that out. We have not talked about Rebecca Coriam, who disappeared in March of 2011, March 22nd. She was a crew member on a ship called the Disney Wonder. And I do think that this could warrant a full episode because it already has some of the commonalities we've seen in other controversial missing cases. Number one, there are a lot of theories. Number two, there's a lot of valid criticism of the subsequent investigation. Then, of course, we have to realize that without having done the kind of research we would need to do to make a full episode of this, we have to realize that this gets very close to us messing with the big mouse. Disney Wonder, that's Big Mickey. That's the Big Mickey mob.
Oh, man, the mouse will come for you.
It reminds me of that show Succession that was on HBO not long ago.
Yeah, the big scandal. No spoilers, but yeah, it's a thing.
Well, there's a massive corporation that has an arm that is essentially their cruise line arm of their company. And you can only imagine that this would be a public relations nightmare. So I would say the company that owns this cruise liner where something may or may not have happened would have an incentive to keep it as quiet as possible or as needed to be for the investigation to continue along. I'm assuming. Others may be looking on at what's occurring here, what occurred, how the investigation moved forward. with a more skeptical eye when it comes to the actions of the company. There is a lot to cover in this topic, I would say. There's a pretty extensive timeline that begins around 5:45 a.m. on March 22nd that you were talking about there, Ben, which was a Tuesday, that it actually saw Rebecca on the phone. It's a CCTV camera. You can watch her being upset, having an argument of some kind, or being just looking like she is upset by what is being said on that phone call. And then she ended up not showing up for work, not showing up for her post the next morning, and that was that. She's been gone ever since.
And people have gone overboard in the past. But here's the thing to set the stage, right? The most likely disappearance of someone on the ocean in a boat is going to be somehow that person going overboard. The seas were calm. There are tons of discrepancies here, too. Just for anyone who's not familiar with the case, you'll quickly find weird stuff, like there were flip-flops in her room that were the wrong size. That doesn't prove anything, but it's weird. It doesn't seem like she would have committed suicide, but we don't know what's on that phone call. We do know that people have not been happy with it. One other screwy thing is jurisdiction, right? Because I think this ship is flagged in the Bahamas, correct? So the initial law enforcement has to be carried out by law enforcement in the Bahamas.
Yeah.
Where does the human trafficking angle come in?
The human where our caller Lana was talking about cruise lines potentially being a source of human trafficking. And, I do not currently have the raw data for that or the evidence to support that claim. But anytime you've got a massive ship that is traveling around through international waters to other countries, and there are people boarding the ship, there are people getting off the ship, there's certainly opportunity, right?
Nah, that makes sense.
Well, yeah, consider the employment practices can become so sticky when you are hiring people from one country to work on a ship of a different country to go into international waters. And as you said, Matt, make many stops along the way. It's not impossible for things to go awry. Like, this is the transportation sector. Right? It's the entertainment sector, sure, but it's also the transit sector. And the transit sector is rife with opportunity for traffickers, like sex trafficking, maybe in the way that you might see it occur in Las Vegas. Like to put a fine point on it, the Johns, or the people who think they're engaging in some kind of consensual sex work, may be actually involved with someone who is being forced or coerced to be there. But I do want to point out, without too much of a spoiler, it wasn't too long ago that Rebecca Coriam's girlfriend at the time said that she said that, in her opinion, Rebecca took a lot of drugs and then maybe deliberately leapt off the boat. But that's still not officially proven, right?
Yeah, not at all. You really have to look at her parents, who have been fighting battles in and out of court since March of 2011 with both Disney Cruise Line, with the Disney company, I guess, and their cruise line arm, as well as just attempting to find out more information from the various investigators that have been working on the case. I don't want to spoil too much here, but as of 2016, the company did settle with the family. So there was money paid. I highly doubt that any wrongdoing was admitted there.
No admission of guilt. That's a settlement is also, it's not necessarily a sketchy thing. Again, I think now we're all being careful because we do want a full episode and we don't want to spoil it. But to be very, very transparent, when a corporation or even a celebrity, for instance, reaches an out-of-court settlement, then what they're doing is They're paying the person off, or they're paying the aggrieved party off, but they're doing it outside of court, meaning there is no legal admission of guilt, and the case will be considered settled, and no further legal proceedings will occur, at least in that specific instance. You know what I mean? Like we see criminal cases go to mistrial or get dismissed, and then a civil case is successful. So there are different avenues.
Well, it's also like not without precedent, the idea of people disappearing from cruise ships. I just found like a Market Watch article from 2017. So the stats will be a little higher by now, but since 2000, according to this article, around 300 people have gone overboard from cruise ships and ferries. And that's according to data collected by Ross Klein, who's a professor in the School of Social Work at Memorial University of Newfoundland in Canada. And of those folks, like there are, many that are still missing, presumed dead. So it's, it's a thing that happens. People drink a lot on cruise ships and they can just topple overboard of their own, not volition, I guess, but just, on their own. That doesn't necessarily mean that there's foul play. And I was wondering too, like, do cruise ships ever like piggyback and carry cargo as well? And apparently that's not really a thing. So I'm wondering, like, where on the ship would human trafficking, victims be held? I mean, I'm assuming, of course, there's going to be internal cargo for the things that they need to make all the meals and, whatever else services are provided on the cruise ship. But I'd be interested to see what the stats are for, proving that human trafficking takes place on, commercial cruise lines. It's
tough. I mean, it's a tough stat to pull in an accurate way, because to your question, to your first question, many of those human trafficking victims are in some cases going to look like any other passenger.
Oh, that's a good point.
They're being controlled by, their main abuser or trafficker, who is putting them up under any number of ruses. And the truth about the matter is, if you are a company operating ships that take hundreds and hundreds of people on a boat regularly, you are going to have a difficult time giving each single individual a background check, other than making sure that their credit card works and that they can legally travel to whatever country you're taking them to. So it's tough. It's tough, and it's a problem that we know. It's a problem that we know the industry has taken steps to address, but it's a Herculean effort. On a brighter note, I know I mention this like every 2 or 3 years. If you want to travel across the ocean and you don't want to go on a cruise ship and you're flexible with your time, you can get a really affordable ticket on a cargo ship. And it'll just be like you and the crew people, maybe 2 other people who love unorthodox travel, and maybe you'll work on that novel. Who knows? But you have to bake in like 2 to 6 weeks of flexibility on either side.
Yikes. I imagine just getting, like, for whatever reason, getting stuck outside in a bay somewhere in this giant cargo ship because you're not allowed to dock yet, and there's some kind of trade dispute occurring, and you just live there on a cargo ship. That's just your life now.
Which would be great if we could record on the cargo ship. That would be pretty neat. I'm still working that out. There are some technical difficulties.
Well, Ben, I mean, you'll recall in not the too distant past, we were recording pretty regularly in what felt like a shipping container. So we'd be perfectly at home in such a situation.
It's true.
I'm in that now, actually.
Holy crap, you are!
Ben is there. Ben's doing it.
Yeah.
Guys, this isn't ours, though. I am on a cargo ship. Don't be mad at me. I thought you would say... I thought I would tell you when I was on the boat. I thought you might say no.
I was wondering what that sloshing sound was that I was hearing.
Yeah.
Well, hey, just to bring it back to Rebecca Coriam, you guys, and without spoiling too much, I think this should be an episode that we cover in the future, and this is what I want to leave you with. This is from a Hollywood Reporter article that is discussing the 2016, I guess, the result of the court case that went through. This is a quote from Jim Walker, a Miami-based attorney who represented the Coriams in the United States throughout this case. He says, "The case has been resolved. They're pursuing an inquest in the UK, but I'm not supposed to talk about the case." So that's interesting, right? Now here is another quote. This one from British parliamentarian, at least in 2016, Chris Matheson. Here's his quote. "My worst fear is that Rebecca Coriam was murdered. It's a possibility and it needs to be investigated properly. The more you look into this, the more it smells rotten. The more it smells like a crime has taken place." So, terrible, like absolutely horrifying and terrible for the Coriam family and for Rebecca Coriam herself. However, for, the possibilities here of uncovering something that we can really dig into, that we can talk about on this show, and maybe expose some stuff going on and problems like you're speaking to, Noel, it feels like this topic is ripe for it. So I'm excited to dig in more. Thank you so much, Lana, for calling and letting us know about this.
Yes, agreed. Thank you. And thank you to everybody who's written in response to our earlier exploration of cruise ships. There's a lot beneath the surface there, we can't wait to dig in. And one of the most amazing things here is just how much firsthand experience we've been learning about in your correspondences with us. We're getting an inside peek, and we want to go further down the rabbit hole, as is our want. Speaking of inside peeks, we also we received a number of correspondences from people who reached out. I had no idea this many people would talk to us about this. People who reached out to tell us how you can, in fact, get booted from one of our favorite secret societies. We'll tell you more about this after a quick word from our sponsors.
And we're back. So the question has arisen. Where did this come up, fellas? The idea of getting booted from the Masons. Do you remember how that came about? Wasn't that on a news episode, or what was that on?
That's Garrison Courtney, who is pretending to be a deep cover CIA spy and built a bunch of high-ranking government officials out of millions. He got close. The people he conned were so important that he got close to signing some multi-billion-dollar contracts, which would have also given him full legal immunity. At one point, he claimed to be hooking someone up in contact with an ambassador that he said he knew through the Freemasons. When the mark in question finally spoke to said ambassador, it turned out that the only thing that ambassador knew was that this con man, Garrison Courtney, had been kicked out of the Masons. And I think that's where the three of us started asking ourselves, the four of us started asking ourselves, how do you get kicked out of the Masons?
I think it's an interesting question, and also the way it occurred to us is interesting because of the paths that we sort of follow with some of these stories. Secret societies have a certain air of sinisterness to them, and I think it's certainly possible to ascribe that same thing to the Freemasons. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of information out there about the Freemasons, and anyone can be nominated to be a member, and you can even go to your local chapter and petition to be a member, and we'll talk about that in a second. But the idea that somehow Masons are these like high level evil types or criminal masterminds or something. At least that's where my mind goes. Like, how do you get kicked out of an organization that's already pure evil? But that's definitely not the case. The Masons do a lot of good work for the community, as we know, like the Shriners, there's an offshoot of the Masons, sponsor all of these children's hospitals. And, you could argue it's just a front for all of their nefarious underground dealings. But, it's an interesting thing to think about. And it's also a very long tradition of Freemasonry, as we know. And there's certainly been some shadowy figures that have been connected to it over the years, but also some very prominent and upstanding figures that have been connected to it. One of which I would argue, is our anonymous emailer. He even doesn't even give a name. He just has a very clandestine email address using letters and numbers that I don't know what it necessarily is pointing to, if it's initials or what, but it's quite a lot of numbers. But he has this to say about the question at hand here. Hi, guys. I was in the Freemasons for just over 5 years, and in that time, I climbed offices in the Blue Lodge, as well as obtained the rank of Knights Templar. Okay. In the York Rite, as well as the 32nd degree in the Scottish Rite. The quickest way to get booted out was by being convicted of a crime. Felons aren't allowed in, and getting one will put you out. Misdemeanors are hit and miss. Demeanors. That was mine.
That was worth it.
Largely depending on who you know. You can be ejected for non-payment of dues. That was a question that came up, but I've never known that to happen. There were guys that hadn't paid for years. Generally, anything over a year past due will mean you're getting letters. I never had access to the, quote, upper echelons, but I did know people who were. From my time in, it all seems like traditional frat things. The main secret is the secrecy and elitism itself. Any other secrets are handshakes, code words, and ritual things. Think repeating phrases, acting out scenes, things like that. No one would really care about. If you attend a public session that is held once a year in most places, you will witness what happens at even the highest levels. Really interesting information. I wouldn't be surprised if small cliques form within the lodge who may get into things that the public wouldn't like. But I think you could say this for any group of considerable size. I'm willing to answer any questions to the best of my ability. Anonymous.
Hey, check this out. Wait, let me get, it's off frame, but you guys remember this one?
Yeah.
This
That's
is
for help, right?
Yeah, there it is.
Wait,
that's
what
for
is
the
it?
YouTube crowd.
What's
is there,
is
there no help for the widow's son?
Ah, that's so good. That's so good.
Love it.
But I don't feel like we're compromising any Masonic organizations in the crowd by saying that. This is the age of the internet.
Well,
That's
and
really
neither does
available.
our anonymous emailer. He seems to think that anybody going to one of these public gatherings would witness a lot of the same stuff, and that maybe it's not as hush-hush as one might think, and that the ritualism of the organization is the notion of this secrecy, but it's maybe not as ironclad as one might think.
Did you see that we got another email really recently about this? I just want to read just this tiny little excerpt from this other one from another current Mason. This person says, sometimes a brother will decide that he is no longer interested in being involved. Maybe he learned that we don't control the world, or he's sick of eating green beans at dinner. We can then issue him what is called a demit, which is a letter stating that he left of his own accord and there are no claims against him. It's like an honorable discharge is what this person says.
Yeah.
Got it.
This idea of like what amounts to an amicable breakup is pretty refreshing. That's a good thing that a lot of more secretive organizations don't really have. I also want to shout out someone who wrote a great letter to us about this from Maine, and some of our personal contacts who have been involved in Freemasonry, who have talked to us about it. The point that you make, Anonymous, that I really appreciated, I think we all appreciated, was that the idea of collusion and conspiracy is likely to form in groups of any size, and it is likely to be the result of a small clique or faction within a larger community working toward their own ends. And the larger community may know nothing about this. Like think about this. Think about small town corruption, rampant in America historically, right? There's going to be a mob in, some equivalent of a mob in Three-Toe, Arkansas, just as much as in Chicago or New York City. They might just not be Italian. They might not call themselves a mob, but the sheriff and the mayor and whomever probably run the town. So with that in mind, in these smaller communities especially, it's completely possible that they would all happen to be members of the same social network, whether that's the Rotarians or the Lions Club or, yes, the Freemasons. And then when they meet at the Lions Club or like at the Toastmasters or whatever, at the Freemasons Lodge, they're able to meet under the cover of that organization. And then they just kind of go to another room, have a little, what we would call a breakout session. And they're like, okay, how are we going to fix this election? You know what I mean?
It's the same thing we've talked about with all these secret societies. Like we had this conversation with John Hodgman, if I'm not mistaken, about the Book and Snake secret society at Harvard, or where was it? Where's that organization?
Yale, I believe.
Yale, that's right. And that's sort of the deal. Is at any of these, there's going to be an opportunity to mingle with high-level people with which you could potentially collude if you both saw an end to doing so. But it doesn't mean necessarily the entire organization is inherently corrupt or based on overthrowing the status quo in some form or fashion.
Yeah. What we've also learned is that you don't need a secret society for any of that.
None of it.
You just need all you need is a country club.
Well, that's exactly
maybe
right.
Own a giant country club somewhere near Boca Raton. Maybe, I don't know, Palm Beach area.
Boca? You go to Boca?
Or, I don't know. Could be in the heart of Atlanta. Could be anywhere, really. Just own and operate a country club.
like
or
she-crab
be
soup?
a member.
All right, I got you.
I've got to say, too, to Anonymous and to the other folks who've written in to give us some excellent information about Freemasonry, which I greatly appreciate. My immediate question now, and it was so hard not to email everybody about this, is there's a line you read from our anonymous listener, Noel, where it's like, misdemeanors are hit and miss, or as you said, misdemeanor. Yeah. And largely, it depends on nepotism, right? The end result of whether or not one can stay with the organization. That's fine. A lot of these organizations do operate primarily on nepotism. As a matter of fact, I would say nepotism is one of the number one things holding the species back overall. Unfortunately, meritocracy is too often a myth, but nepotism aside, I wonder what the misdemeanors are. Are they misdemeanors solely of moral turpitude, as you'll hear sometimes on a customs form? Or, like, I would love if there was, for some reason, something incredibly specific and something that seemed relatively meaningless or innocuous to us non-Masons on the outside. And I wonder if that's like the number one crime in Freemasonry. I hope to God it's stamp fraud. I hope for some reason they're like the one thing that'll, sometimes you hit people with a car and sometimes they die. That's an accident. Accidents happen. But if you make fake stamps,
perhaps coin forgery.
Yes.
That would be another good, real specific one.
A counterfeiter.
Exactly. Oh, I love that.
We need more coins right now.
That's what I've heard. I've seen the
people out there.
signs. I've seen the signs at all the gas stations. Don't ask for coin change. I did find an article written by a master Mason by the name of Matthew Arnold McIntosh on a website called wvmasons.org. And the headline is High Moral Standards of Freemasons. And he goes through and kind of writes a treatise about how at its heart, the whole purpose of Freemasonry is to impart this high moral standard on its members. And then I was sort of like, okay, how do I become a Mason? Didn't take long to find a website that gives you kind of a step-by-step into how to do so. It's masonic-lodge-of-education.com. And it reads almost like an old-timey pamphlet. Become a Freemason. Would you like to become a Freemason and belong to the oldest and largest fraternity in the world? Here's how. You must first find a Masonic lodge location near you, contact them, and ask for a petition to join. And then if you become a Freemason, you will, this is like serious selling points, join both the oldest and largest fraternity in the world. Join a brotherhood of over 2 million men of all ages, from all races, religions, and countries, and from all walks of life. And then it has some pictures of some real cool signet rings that you get, I guess, when you become a member. Why do so many men want to become a Freemason? And it describes the organization as a voluntary, fraternal organization composed of men of goodwill, good character, and good reputation, whom in most jurisdictions around the world believe in an almighty creator and practice the spirit of universal brotherhood to man. A lot of man talk in this, though.
Right. Yeah, that's one of the big things. Yeah, we need to get in front of that before someone's writing to us about this. So earlier, I think one of us said anybody can get in. I know some of us are writing emails about that right now. Don't worry. Pause your email. Yes, it's only dudes. There are associated organizations that are not entirely just dudes, but that is one great discrimination of the Masonic orders. I think also, as you mentioned earlier, Noel, one need not have a specific religion, but must have some sort of belief in a bigger thing.
Spiritual, yes, exactly. And then just to wrap this up, I've got this giant alphabetical list. I'm going to kind of just skip around a little bit, but just some highly influential and big deal folks who were Masons, and we know this. Bud William Abbott of Abbott and Costello fame was a Mason. Buzz Aldrin was in fact a Mason, the second man to walk on the moon. Let's see. We've got Gerald Ford, who was a president, we know. Henry Ford, automobile pioneer, of course. Let's see. You throw a pin at this list and you're going to find somebody influential. Joseph Smith, the founder of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, aka the Mormons. Isn't that interesting? I do love the idea. This is fascinating to me, and I think we've already kind of expressed why this is, but it's interesting. I think of Masonry as being all about these clandestine kind of rites and rituals, and to me that would kind of fly in the face of being a Christian or someone who's very closely identifies with but no, that's not the case. They're hand in hand, and one doesn't necessarily require the other.
We talked about that, right? One of the only things you have to have is a belief in a higher power, and it does not matter what that higher power is in your mind, as long as you believe that there is one.
However, Freemasons have been enemies of dogmatic, oppressive religions. And in the past have been enemies of oppressive governments. I mean, look at the French Revolution. Look at how many founding fathers of the United States were affiliated with Freemasonry. It's kind of there's something collegiate and salon-like about it.
Right.
The idea, the free exchange of concepts and being able to say, well, I'm not 100% on board with this whole Catholicism thing, and not go to church jail or whatever they called it back then. The Inquisition. Sorry.
Oh, 100%.
Not church jail.
No, I like that. Well, that's what they call it. It's one of many Enlightenment organizations, like the Rosicrucians or there's many what do we talk about? The Order of the Pug. Remember that one? The pug one from Ridiculous History, where you kiss the pug's butts? That was wasn't that a French backlash against Freemasonry? Like Freemasonry was outlawed in France, and so they made this other organization.
Nice.
Voltaire was a Freemason, a very influential French philosopher who wrote about oppressive governments and oppressive systems. So interesting stuff, guys. But yeah, I think that does it for this one.
Did you know George Clinton was a Freemason?
Of Parliament Funkadelic?
No, the third vice president of the United States.
Who am I thinking of?
I just did it because I knew you would think about that. George Clinton.
Dang
Sorry.
He's a Mason of funk. That's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people would agree that there is tangible benefit to these organizations, both for the individuals involved and for often for the communities, right, in which those lodges exist, like to the point about the Shriners and funding medical care for the needy and for children. I think they get vilified sometimes. Like, we never did an episode on the anti-Masonic Party, which confirms my standing theory that if you want something like that, like a political party or a religion, to be successful, you have to be aspirational and offering something. You can't found a party just against something, because what do you do when that's gone? You know what I mean? Like, no more polar bears club. The polar bears are extinct, but we already spent all this money on the chips and dip and the catering, so we're still going to get together.
Wow, that's really great, but
that's a terrible example. I hope
this is something relevant. At some point, everybody listening right now or watching this, go out, find a list of the former Supreme Court justices within the United States that were or are members of Free and Accepted Masons. It's just interesting to see, like, when it comes to law and politics, Ben, as you noted earlier, a lot of people who are in government are a part of this organization.
Would I be correct in assuming that many of them who were Freemasons would be more on the progressive tip than conservative, or is there really not much of a line there?
It's not much of a line. Honestly, it's tough because the definition of what is or is not considered conservative or progressive has changed so much over just a few centuries. You know, like,
of course.
Like, we're not that far away from the time when women voting was considered to be like this radical, extreme idea. What's next? We're going to blow up the moon? And then later, you know, a few decades ago, we thought about doing just that.
Well, the most important former Freemason to me is clearly Robert Pershing Wadlow, the tallest human on record, who I believe was the guy that you'll see a sculpture of outside most Ripley's Believe It or Not locations the world over.
And I think Handsome Family has a beautiful, heartbreaking song about him. I did not know he was a Mason, but it makes sense. Also, Matt, I'm sorry, I don't want to keep us going too long on this, but to the point you raise about the justices, I would ask, is it possible that people at the higher levels of government, or maybe higher levels of business as well, just tend to do more extracurricular activities? You know, are they also like
overachievers, you're saying?
Yeah. Are they like big in their HOA? Do they go get like public notary certification because they just like the certificate? I mean, are they members of Toastmasters as well? Rotarians, probably philanthropic organizations.
Kiwanis Club, everything.
Yeah, the whole nine, all the good ones.
It certainly is encouraged, you know, when you're in school. Like, you got to get those extracurriculars up to get into a good college.
Well, it makes sense. But we're talking about the differences in ideologies within members of Freemasonry. Think about this. The first director of the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, the guy who called Martin Luther King Jr., I think, I can't tell you the exact quote, but the most dangerous man, essentially, within the United States at one point in time. The person who instituted COINTELPRO and spying on people who were attempting to capture their civil liberties and equality, that guy was a Freemason. Also, someone who was on the other side fighting for civil rights, Reverend Jesse Jackson, was a Freemason. Or is. It's just really interesting to me that you can have this wide swath of belief and things that you would fight for, and they're all part of the same organization.
Yeah.
Skull and Bones, presidents, Skull and Bones. Think about that.
No, it's a good point. Also, like Strom Thurmond, who's a notoriously Dixiecrat, the Republican senator who from the state of Georgia, if I'm not mistaken.
I hope he burns.
He's a bad guy. Bad guy. Last one, and then we'll definitely move on, but there's a lot of interesting names here to talk about. This is just, I was not aware of this, just as like a little bit of trivia. William Howard Taft, who was not only the president of the United States, but also held the position of Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. And he's the only man ever to have headed up these two branches of U.S. government.
Only president to be stuck in a bathtub as well.
Also true.
And just as a counterpoint, you know who else? Richard Pryor. Okay.
We'll pause here. Please keep writing to us with your inside experiences with the Freemasons. We would love to hear about your time in a Masonic order, whatever you're comfortable sharing with us. Most importantly, let us know if for some reason it needs to be anonymous. Let us know about counterfeiters, and let us know about what the red line misdemeanors are and how late can our library books be, etc. But if you want to learn a little bit more, do check out our past episodes. Check out our YouTube channel, youtube.com/conspiracy stuff, where we also explore things like Albert Pike and a couple of other things that will be of interest to people who want to learn more about Masonic history.
Oh, and shout out to Jonesport Lodge 188.
Also, Blue Lodge for life. The Blue Lodge, because that just makes me think of Twin Peaks.
And we are back to examine what is sometimes called a life-saving organization and sometimes called a branch of a rather secretive, I'll just say it, Scientology. Okay, we've got an email. We've got an email from Cliff C. I want to give this to everybody, and then we'll follow up on it, okay? So, Cliff, you said, hello. Back in 2012, I went through a Narconon addiction program in the mountains of Southern California. Scientology uses these programs to recruit people at their lowest and most vulnerable points. The entire program is based on teachings by Hubbard, by which means L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of First Dianetics, and then when he got sued, the founder of Scientology. This is a topic worth diving into, says Cliff, but as I don't know if you will read this, I'll just give you bullet points for now. And he lists these, and they're fairly brutal. 1, they lock you in a cabin in the desert, telling you that you may leave, but they will follow you with water and only give it to you if you come back. They will not call your family or help during the first month if you decide to wander off into the desert. 2, they say they have medical staff. This is staff they have trained and ordained as doctors and nurses. Next, they force you to sit silently staring into another person's eyes for 5 hours without movement, then continue for 5 more hours with your eyes closed. If you flinch or start to doze off, you start again. If you question Scientology, they move you to isolation until you promise to stop. They charge families tens of thousands of dollars, constantly ask for more money, and say that we don't actually do Scientology here. They monitor your phone calls under threat, so you cannot say otherwise. And then Cliff concludes, as with most rehab programs, they want you to take responsibility for your actions, but they blatantly take advantage of this to make you feel like you are a lowlife and they, Scientology, are the only solution. Having said all this, says Cliff, it probably does help some people, but in my honest and clean for many years, not thanks to them, opinion, they scare people away from rehabilitation and make folks think it is a form of prison. I know this is something that maybe we have heard about before, but I don't know if we've talked about Narconon on the air with each other. Have we? We haven't, have we?
I can't remember a time unless it was... No, I don't think our drugs in the military would have covered it, or our hallucinogens in medical research. No, I think this might be the first.
Yeah, so it's weird because both the Church of Scientology and Narconon say that it's a secular program. It's completely independent of the religious teachings of Scientology. But it seems like many people are disillusioned with Narconon or have family members who have gone through that program. They argue the opposite. They say it's a front group for Scientology with the ultimate aim of recruiting people. What do you guys think about that?
Well, is it actually in any way associated with Scientology?
Yes.
It is.
Yeah.
It is like officially, like as an organizationally?
Its parent company is something called the Association for Better Living and Education. Wait for it, ABLE. And ABLE is owned and controlled by the Church of Scientology. So it's like a subsidiary of a subsidiary, which means they could argue, of course, that we exist independent of that. We just have our roots there.
Yeah, if you go to Scientology.org, they have a whole section on drug rehabilitation and prevention. And that's the thing. That's what makes Scientology a bit, insidious, is they appeal to people at their lowest, either professionally or they're trying to get a foothold. They've moved to Hollywood and, they're trying to become an actor or a screenwriter or whatever. And that's the story you always hear. But this is even more predatory. Whereas people that are truly at their lowest point and perhaps come from wealthy families or are able to pay the money that it takes, because rehab ain't cheap. I always assumed Narconon was like Al-Anon, and that it was just another type of meeting that you go to. And that it was like a family situation, that it wasn't like rehab exactly. But this is really news to me.
Al-Anon,
Alcoholics Anonymous, rather. I'm sorry, that's different too. But yeah.
Yeah, Al-Anon's separate from Alcoholics Anonymous, but I think it was, I don't think they're in cahoots or in conflict with one another. And I think Narconon, so Al-Anon's founded in 1951, right? Narconon was founded in 1966. So without sounding conspiratorial, is it possible that Hubbard made a similar name, on purpose as a marketing or brand recognition thing? And the more I've read about Narconon, the more I see problems with just their treatment. In 1970, an official for the Church of Scientology said that Narconon's rehabilitation programs are based entirely on the tenets and teachings of Scientology. And you know what that means? No psychotherapists, no psychologists.
Right. Yeah, that's something that I wish we would have gotten into with Mike on that episode. We didn't really talk about the aversion to psychologists and psychiatry. And I could probably guess why it is, because it gives you agency over people gaslighting you and the tools to cope with abusers. That's just my 2 cents on why that might be. But of course, there's a whole mythology wrapped up in it within the teachings of Scientology. It's fascinating stuff. I had no idea about this connection though, like with with Narconon and Scientology. Zero.
Oh yeah.
If you look at their website, I went to narconon.org and I was looking around trying to find something that says Scientology on it. On their main page, I did a quick little Apple F for Scientology. And you know where I found it? Nowhere. It's not on there. It's not on that front page. It does not say Scientology anywhere, at least in something that is searchable, and I can't find it anywhere in like an image or something, maybe just be embedded in an image. But if you go all the way to the bottom, under our history, our technology, and you go to About Narconon, then you do a little Apple F for Scientology there. You know what you find? Zero identifiable mentions of Scientology. But if you go all the way down again, underneath, there's a subheading under About Narconon, Global Mission, 50 years saving lives, blah, 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 blah. Oh, here it is. L. Ron Hubbard.
There we go. There we go. Wow. We got him.
Talk about the stuff they don't want you to know. I mean,
right. Yeah.
It's just weird, man.
I've wanted to do, peek behind the curtain. I wanted to do for a number of years an episode on problems with rehabilitation programs throughout history. And Narconon has been in my, on my radar for a while, but it's tricky because we want to make sure that we're not, first off, we're not giving people medical advice or legal advice. And secondly, that we're not, I don't want us to do anything that would stop someone who needs help from going to a rehabilitation center. That's such an important thing. But also, the thing about Narconon, here's one of the weirdest things about them in terms of their treatment. Have you guys heard of niacin bombs?
Yes. Yeah. This is where some of that comes from?
Yeah, they would dose somebody with 4,000 milligrams a day of niacin. And this is meant to, this is like part of a vitamin mineral supplement regimen that is supposed to address pre-existing nutritional deficiencies and help you offset nutrient loss through sweating. But the niacin thing goes back to Hubbard because he believed niacin would increase, I think it's free fatty acid and the mobilization of free fatty acid, and then it would help you get rid of toxins.
Wow.
So they would dose you up with these massive amounts of niacin, And niacin, like any other particular substance, it's got a diminishing return. You know what I mean? If you have too much niacin, it can be dangerous for you.
I've heard people talk about using niacin to like spoof a P test, for drugs.
Really?
I don't know if that actually works or not, but it, in the same way that you're talking about the idea that I think what it does is it like causes you to sweat like crazy and causes like the capillaries on your skin to sort of expand and you get really red. That's my understanding. It's interesting though. I don't know if it actually works or not though.
It does flush you. It does give you a flush to your skin. It's also banned in Quebec and France because of this. You'll see one health agency in Quebec specifically that said they had to shut down a Narconon and Scientology-based rehab center because 4 separate clients have been taken to the hospital due to the methods used there. This is stuff like having people with addictions go cold turkey off something, no methadone or step downs, etc. And then these long detox sessions in saunas that are meant to help you sweat out drugs. And then, they pump you up with a ton of vitamins, which may not always be healthy for you. It's also quite expensive. So there's question about the profit motive. But yes, in response to Cliff's email here, it very much seems that these two organizations, Narconon and the Church of Scientology, are related. The question is, how independent are they? And Cliff, do you and other folks who have had experience with Narconon feel that their ultimate goal was to recruit you into Scientology or to help you get clean?
Can I read the official? I found it on their website.
All right, lay it on us.
Yeah. Okay, so this is at Narconon, but it's not spelled the way you may think it should be spelled. It is NARCONON.org, just so everyone knows, /drug-rehab. Okay, this is where you're going. It says, since 1966, superior results, long-term effectiveness. The Narconon program is based on the discoveries and writings of L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of Scientology religion. However, Narconon is non-religious, and a person does not become a Scientologist by doing the program. Mr. Hubbard was a humanitarian whose works include discoveries in the fields of education, mental health, and criminal reform, as well as drug rehabilitation. He began his research into drugs during the 1960s and 70s when recreational drug use had reached epidemic proportions. He developed technologies to overcome the adverse effects of virtually every type of drug. Wanting to help those lost to addiction, Mr. Hubbard made his discoveries broadly available, and the result was the establishment of Narconon.
See, they said it. They know what's up. The question is just how separate those organizations are. You know what I mean? Like, I can't be the only person who found out late night after a series of poorly informed partying decisions that Pizza Hut and Taco Bell are run by the same organization. You know what I mean? They literally split the building in half. That blew my mind. And the song about it is quite good too. So maybe that's one of the big questions. Like, when someone is helping a loved one go into a program like Narconon, would they make the same decision if they were aware of its connections to the organization known as Scientology? I mean, that's not a ding on either of those organizations. That's just a question of why that message is not front and center on the website. Because Matt,
Yeah.
you're really good. You like have a nose for digging into stuff. We all do. So if it took you that long, I feel like there are a lot of people who would miss it. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was not easy to find that.
It's fascinating.
And there we leave it. Thank you so much, Lana. Thank you, anonymous former Mason, multiple anonymous former Masons. Yes. And thank you, Cliff, for writing in. We can't wait to hear more from you all. I think that we have found rich fodder for several full episodes in the future. Assuming, of course, that Big Mickey doesn't get us. That's always a possibility. Or, as you said off air, Matt, Big Rehab. We would love to hear from you, specifically you, We get a lot of folks who contact us and say, I know you always say that you're talking to me, but I never had a reason to write in before. You don't really have to have a reason. Just, give us an idea, share your experiences. And for anyone who is struggling with substance of one sort or another, there are multiple resources available to help you. Narconon's not the only one in the game. So do check it out. Do reach out. You're not alone, and you are worth the effort.
Yes, and specifically you, anonymous person who called and left a message about a curse and possibly something that occurred where there was a murder and a trial. You know who you are. I texted you and I called you. I need to get a little more information from you in order to actually talk about it on this show. So if you're out there, look at your texts. There might be a weird one, and respond to it, please.
And if you'd like to respond to us, of course, we try to be easy to find. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Twitter. You can find us on Instagram. We like to recommend Here's Where It Gets Crazy, which has, for the second time in a row, been confirmed to be the best page on the entirety of Facebook by us.
Yep.
Just on this show.
Yeah, it's great. Here's Where It Gets Crazy. Go there now.
But what if you hate social media?
Then you go to YouTube. Because YouTube is kind of not social media. Just kidding, it is. But youtube.com/conspiracy stuff.
What if you don't like videos or fun or the internet?
Then you can, what? I don't know.
Call a phone. You call a number.
Oh,
right?
yeah, you're right. You're right. Yep. Just like that person. 1-833-STDWYTK. That's our number. You'll hear Ben. That's how you'll know you're in the right place. Leave a message, and we would love to hear anything and everything, any kind of story, any kind of idea. Just talk to us, please.
And if none of that quite jostles your apostles, can I say that on air?
Yes.
Oh, God, yes.
Jostle them apostles.
All right. If none of that quite jostles your apostles, and you're not on board with phone calls, we get it. You're not on board with social media, totally, we get that. We have one last way that you can always contact us. Whether or not you're a Freemason, whether or not you approve of Narconon, whether or not you've ever been on a cruise ship, just send us a good old-fashioned email. We are
conspiracy@iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.